3 men pushed her to kill her, but fate led her into his arms. People around her often thought she was lucky, that she lived a normal, happy life with family and friends who cared for her. But behind that bright smile, Amina carried a burden no one could see. Her life was filled with fear, loneliness, and challenges that made her feel trapped, as if there were walls closing in from all sides. She lived in a small town where everyone knew each other. At first glance, it seemed like the perfect place to grow up. The streets were quiet, and neighbors greeted one another warmly. Yet for Amina, this calm exterior hid a world of manipulation and control that was slowly tightening around her. There were 3 men who had found ways to influence her life in ways she could not resist. Each one in their own way made her feel powerless, each one adding to the weight she carried silently every day. The first was her father's business partner, a man who seemed friendly at first. He would often visit their house, bringing gifts and stories of his travels. To outsiders, he appeared kind and generous, always offering help or advice. But for Amina, his presence brought a deep unease she could not explain. He would make comments that seemed innocent but carried subtle threats, reminding her that she was vulnerable and depended on others. Slowly, his influence started to affect her confidence. She began doubting her own instincts, questioning if she could make decisions without his approval. The second was a neighbor, someone who lived just a few doors down. He was known as a charming man in the neighborhood, always polite and helpful. But behind his polite mask, he was controlling and manipulative. He would show up at unexpected times, asking her questions that felt intrusive. Sometimes, he would create situations that made her feel trapped, forcing her to respond in ways she didn't want. He had a way of twisting words, making her feel guilty for things that were not her fault. It was exhausting for Amina to constantly think about how to navigate his presence without angering him or causing trouble. The third was a so-called family friend, a man who had been close to her family for years. Because of this long-standing relationship, he had earned the trust of her parents and the people around her. But with Amina, he used this trust to manipulate her emotions. He would tell her that she owed him respect and attention, that ignoring him or refusing his requests would bring disappointment to her family. She often felt conflicted, wanting to be kind and obedient, yet feeling the injustice of his demands. Every encounter left her feeling smaller, weaker, and unsure of herself. As these 3 men tightened their influence over her life, Amina began to feel isolated. She could not confide in anyone because she feared judgment or disbelief. Friends tried to notice her distress, but she always smiled and said she was fine. Family members were unaware of the subtle ways these men were controlling her. Slowly, her world became smaller. She stopped sharing her thoughts and dreams, afraid that speaking too loudly might draw attention from those who would use her fears against her. At school and in public, Amina maintained a cheerful facade. She laughed with friends, helped her classmates, and appeared confident. But inside, she was constantly calculating her next move. She worried about what the men would say or do next, and this anxiety drained her energy. There were nights she would lie awake, thinking about how unfair her life felt, wishing she could disappear from the pressure that surrounded her. The loneliness was crushing. It was a kind of sadness that no one could see, a silent storm that raged inside her heart. Despite this, Amina was resilient. She found small ways to cope with the stress. She wrote in her journal, filling pages with her thoughts and emotions that she could not share with anyone else. She would take long walks in the quiet parts of town, letting the wind and the rustling trees give her a sense of freedom. These moments became her refuge, a place where she could breathe and remind herself that she was still her own person, even if the world around her tried to control her. Her daily life was a careful balance of pleasing others while protecting her own sense of self. Each day brought new challenges. Sometimes she had to say things she did not mean, smile when she felt sad, and pretend to agree when she wanted to refuse. The constant tension made her anxious and tired, but she never let anyone see how deeply it affected her. People around her admired her composure, not knowing it was the result of careful planning and silent suffering. Amina also had dreams. She wanted to study, to travel, to meet new people, and to live a life where her choices were her own. But these dreams felt distant, almost impossible. The men in her life were like invisible chains, holding her back with subtle threats and manipulations. Every step toward independence felt like a risk, and every decision required careful thought. Sometimes she wondered if she would ever break free from their influence, or if she would remain trapped forever. Even with all the challenges, there were small joys that gave her hope. The laughter of a child on the street, the smell of fresh flowers, the warmth of the sun on her face. These simple things reminded her that life had beauty too. She held onto these moments tightly, using them to fuel her courage and resilience. They became symbols of a world she wanted to reach, a life where she could finally be free from fear and control. As time passed, the pressure from the three men grew stronger. Their control was not violent, but it was relentless. Every interaction made Amina feel smaller, as if she had no power over her own life. The mental and emotional strain became almost unbearable. She began to fear what might happen if she made a mistake or defied them. The more they pushed, the more she felt cornered. It was as if the walls of her life were closing in and there was no way out. Yet, even in these dark moments, Amina's inner strength was growing. She learned to observe, to anticipate, and to protect herself in small ways. She found ways to say no without drawing attention, to avoid situations that felt unsafe, and to seek comfort in her private world. Though the fear and pressure were constant, these small victories gave her hope. She realized that even in a world where she felt powerless, she still had the ability to make choices that could shape her future. The part of Amina's life that seemed most unbearable was the feeling of invisibility. The men who controlled her saw her only as someone to manipulate, not as a person with thoughts, feelings, and dreams. This invisibility hurt deeply, but it also strengthened her resolve. She began to understand that her life belonged to her, that her happiness and safety were not negotiable. The realization was quiet but powerful, like a small flame in the darkness that promised light if she could protect it. By the end of this period, Amina's life was a complex mix of fear, resilience, and silent hope. She faced each day with courage she did not always recognize, maintaining a cheerful exterior while fighting inner battles that no one could see. Though the weight of the three men's influence was heavy, she had begun to understand the importance of patience, observation, and self-preservation. Her journey was just beginning, and the challenges ahead would test her in ways she could not yet imagine. But even in this dark and complicated world, there was one undeniable truth. Amina had not given up. She had learned to survive, to protect her inner world, and to hold on to the hope that life could be better. And sometimes, even in the smallest and quietest moments, fate has a way of planting the seeds of change, waiting for the right time to help someone find the light after a long period of darkness. Amina's life continued under the weight of pressure and fear, and each day seemed to bring new challenges that tested her patience and courage. The three men who had so quietly taken control over parts of her life now seemed to grow bolder. Their subtle manipulations became more constant, and the way they watched and influenced her made her feel as if she was trapped in a cage she could not escape. Every interaction with them left her exhausted, anxious, and unsure of herself. Her father's business partner, who once seemed merely controlling, now started using threats that were harder to ignore. He would remind Amina that her family's reputation depended on her behavior, and any misstep could bring shame to them. At first, these words seemed like warnings, but gradually they became a tool to make her fearful and obedient. Amina began to avoid expressing her opinions or desires around him. She would nod, smile, and agree to things she did not want, convincing herself that this was the only way to survive. The neighbor, meanwhile, became increasingly invasive. He would ask questions about her daily routines, her friends, and even her personal thoughts. Sometimes, he would appear unexpectedly at her door, offering help with small tasks but expecting loyalty and gratitude in return. If she refused, he would act disappointed or subtly imply that she was ungrateful. Amina felt a constant tension whenever he was around, as though one wrong move could bring punishment. Her small world was shrinking, and she began spending less time outside, avoiding areas where he might appear. The family friend, whose presence had always been hard to question, started applying pressure in ways that attacked her self-confidence. He would remind her that he had known her family for years and had done many favors, implying that she owed him obedience. Amina felt trapped between the desire to respect her elders and the growing awareness that he was manipulating her. This inner conflict left her exhausted. She questioned herself constantly, wondering if she was overreacting or imagining things, and the uncertainty made her feel even smaller. The mental pressure was relentless. Amina began experiencing sleepless nights, lying awake and thinking of ways to escape the control that had been imposed on her. Every interaction with these men left her feeling drained, and her once bright world seemed shadowed by constant tension. She thought about running away, about leaving the town and her family behind, but the thought terrified her. The unknown seemed scarier than the men she already knew. The stress affected her daily life in other ways as well. At school, she struggled to focus on her studies. She would sit in class, her mind occupied with worries about what she might have done wrong, what the men might say next, or how to avoid situations that could bring trouble. Even her friendships began to suffer. Amina wanted to confide in anyone, but she feared judgment or disbelief. She did not want to seem weak, nor did she want to risk making the men angrier. Slowly, she began to retreat into herself, hiding behind polite smiles and quiet words. As the pressure built, Amina began to feel a sense of hopelessness she had never experienced before. She wondered if life would always be like this, filled with fear, manipulation, and endless control. Thoughts of escape grew darker and more desperate. Sometimes, she even imagined taking extreme measures just to break free from the constant tension. These thoughts terrified her, and she quickly pushed them away, afraid of what they might mean or what consequences they could bring. Yet the fact that they came at all was a sign of the depth of her despair. Despite these dark thoughts, Amina's inner strength was still alive. She had learned small ways to protect herself and cope with her stress. Writing in her journal became a lifeline. She poured her fears, frustrations, and secret dreams onto the pages, giving her a sense of relief and control. She also took long walks in quiet areas, where she could breathe freely and feel a small sense of freedom. Nature became a refuge for her, a place where the weight of the men's control did not reach. These moments were brief, but they reminded her that life could have moments of peace, even in the midst of chaos. Amina also began noticing small changes within herself. The fear and despair were still present, but they were now accompanied by careful observation and awareness. She started noticing patterns in the men's behavior, learning to anticipate their moods and reactions. She became strategic, thinking carefully about what to say and do to protect herself. Each small success in maintaining her safety and independence strengthened her resolve, even as the outside world continued to press down on her. There were moments, however, when the pressure became almost unbearable. One afternoon, her father's business partner cornered her in the house, making demands that felt impossible to meet. Amina's heart raced, and panic filled her chest. She wanted to shout, to run, to escape, but fear held her frozen. In those moments, she felt the full weight of the control that had been imposed on her life. She realized how vulnerable she truly was, and the despair she felt seemed overwhelming. The neighbor's manipulations also reached a peak during this time. He asked Amina to do favors that she felt were unfair, then criticized her when she hesitated. He would smile in a way that made her feel guilty, as though she had done something wrong simply for asserting her own needs. These encounters left her feeling powerless, like a puppet being moved by invisible strings. Yet in the quiet moments afterward, she reminded herself that she had survived before and could do so again. Amina's life began to feel like a tightrope walk. Each day required careful planning, constant vigilance, and silent courage. She could not trust anyone fully, yet she had to navigate her world with politeness, smiles, and obedience. The constant tension began to weigh on her body as well as her mind. She experienced headaches, fatigue, and moments of deep sadness. Still, she refused to show weakness to those around her. Her cheerful exterior remained intact, a mask that hid the storm raging inside. Through all this pressure, one thing became clear to Amina: she could not give up. She had to survive, no matter how hard life became. Every moment of fear, every instance of manipulation, became a test of her strength. She realized that even in the darkest moments, she had the ability to think, to plan, and to find small victories. These victories were her lifeline, small reminders that she was still her own person, even if the world tried to make her feel otherwise. The inner conflict Amina faced was constant. She wanted freedom, yet freedom felt impossible. She wanted to speak out, yet speaking out could bring more danger. She wanted help, yet trust felt risky. These conflicting desires made her feel trapped, and the longer she stayed in this situation, the heavier the weight on her shoulders became. Every day was a battle between hope and fear, courage and despair. Despite all the challenges, Amina's moments of joy and hope continued to exist, even if they were fleeting. She found solace in small things: a kind word from a friend, the beauty of the sunset, the sound of birds in the morning. These simple pleasures reminded her that life was not entirely dark, that there were moments worth holding on to. They gave her the strength to endure, to keep moving forward even when the path seemed impossible. As this period of her life reached its peak, Amina began to feel a strange mixture of exhaustion and determination. The men's influence was strong, but she was learning to survive within it. She learned to navigate her world carefully, to protect herself without drawing attention, and to hold onto hope in quiet ways. Even as despair pressed down, a small flame of courage burned within her, waiting for the right moment to grow. And deep inside, Amina began to sense that life could change. She did not know how or when, but she felt that something, or someone, might come into her life to offer support and guidance. The thought of help seemed distant, almost impossible, but it also gave her the faintest spark of hope. That hope, however small, would soon become a lifeline that could guide her out of darkness and toward a future she had only dreamed of. Amina's life, which had been filled with constant fear and pressure, was on the edge of a new beginning, though she did not yet know it. Her days were still tense, filled with cautious interactions with the three men who controlled so much of her life. Yet, there was a subtle shift in the air, an invisible change that she could not quite explain. It began on a quiet morning, when she decided to take her usual walk through the small park near her house. The air was crisp, and the early sunlight cast long shadows on the paths lined with trees. Amina walked slowly, her thoughts heavy but her steps deliberate, trying to find a moment of peace. As she walked, she noticed a man sitting on a bench, reading a book. He looked ordinary at first glance, with simple clothes and a gentle smile. But there was something in his presence that made Amina pause. Unlike the men who had made her life difficult, this man did not seem demanding or judgmental. He appeared calm, patient, and kind in a way that was immediately comforting. For a moment, Amina felt an unusual sense of ease. Her chest, which often felt tight with anxiety, seemed to relax ever so slightly. The man looked up from his book and noticed her standing nearby. He smiled warmly and greeted her politely. Amina, taken aback by the unexpected kindness, nodded in return, feeling a strange mixture of curiosity and caution. She had learned to be careful around strangers, especially men, but something about him felt different. There was no hidden expectation, no pressure, no subtle threat, just a simple greeting, genuine and harmless. Curiosity began to outweigh her caution. She walked closer to the bench and, after a brief hesitation, asked if she could sit. The man nodded and moved his book slightly to make space for her. Amina took a seat, her heart still beating fast but not with fear. This time, it was anticipation. For the first time in a long while, she felt she could simply exist without the weight of manipulation pressing down on her. They exchanged small talk at first, talking about the weather, the beauty of the park, and simple observations about their surroundings. Amina found herself laughing quietly at his light-hearted jokes, something she hadn't done freely in months. The man introduced himself as Rafik, a resident of the town who worked as a teacher in the local school. He spoke gently, with a calmness that made Amina feel she could trust him, even though she had learned to distrust most people. She did not immediately share the details of her life. She was cautious, naturally. But there was a warmth in his demeanor that encouraged her to speak more freely than she had with anyone else in recent months. For the first time, she felt that she could be heard without fear of judgment. As days passed, Amina began visiting the park more often, finding excuses to see Rafik. Their conversations grew longer and more meaningful. He did not push her to share anything she was uncomfortable with. Instead, he listened patiently, offering understanding and encouragement in subtle ways. This gentle presence became a source of comfort for Amina, a quiet refuge from the pressures and manipulation she faced in her daily life. Slowly, she began to trust him, a feeling that had been nearly impossible for months. One afternoon, as the golden sunlight filtered through the trees, Rafik noticed a shadow of worry on Amina's face. He asked gently if she was all right. At first, she tried to smile and say she was fine, as she had learned to do so many times before. But something about his genuine concern made her hesitate. Slowly, she began to share a little about the struggles she had been facing, the constant pressure from people in her life, and the fear that had been her companion for far too long. She did not go into full detail yet, but even the small pieces of her story were enough for Rafik to understand that she had been through much more than she let on. Rafik listened without interruption, nodding thoughtfully and offering soft words of support. He never judged, never criticized, never questioned her choices. He simply acknowledged her feelings and offered reassurance that she was not alone. This simple act of understanding had a profound effect on Amina. She realized that, for the first time in a long while, someone saw her as a human being with thoughts, feelings, and dreams, not just as a target for control or manipulation. Encouraged by his kindness, Amina began opening up gradually. She shared memories of her childhood, moments that had brought her joy, and also moments that had hurt her deeply. Rafik listened patiently, occasionally asking gentle questions to show interest and understanding. With every conversation, Amina felt a small weight lift from her shoulders. The fear that had dominated her life for so long seemed to loosen slightly, replaced by a sense of hope that she had thought impossible. Rafik also noticed Amina's cautious behavior. He understood that her trust had been broken many times, that she had learned to hide her true feelings and protect herself. Rather than pressuring her, he allowed her to take her time, to reveal herself at her own pace. This patience was unfamiliar to Amina, but deeply comforting. She began to see him not only as a friend, but as someone who could help her navigate the complicated emotions that had been buried for years. One day, while sitting together on the park bench, Rafik spoke softly about hope and resilience. He told her that life could change in unexpected ways, that even in the darkest moments, small opportunities for freedom and happiness could appear if one was willing to notice them. His words resonated deeply with Amina. She had been living in fear for so long that the idea of hope felt foreign, almost impossible. But hearing him speak with such sincerity made her begin to believe that perhaps life could offer more than fear and manipulation. As their friendship grew, Amina noticed that she was beginning to smile more freely, laugh more openly, and feel lighter than she had in months. Rafik became a steady presence in her life, someone who reminded her that she was not alone and that she had the strength to face her challenges. The world, which had once felt suffocating and oppressive, now seemed to hold possibilities she had almost forgotten. Amina also began to notice a sense of protection and care in Rafik that went beyond friendship. He would check on her regularly, offering support without demanding anything in return. He encouraged her to pursue small goals, to take steps toward independence, and to recognize her own strength. Each act of kindness, each moment of understanding, slowly rebuilt her confidence. She began to see herself not as a victim of circumstance, but as someone capable of making choices, asserting boundaries, and seeking happiness. One afternoon, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves in the park as Amina shared a memory from her childhood. She told Rafik about her dreams, the hopes she had once held, and the plans she had imagined for her future. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine a life beyond fear and manipulation. Rafik listened attentively, his calm presence providing reassurance that her dreams were valid and achievable. The conversation left Amina with a quiet sense of determination. Perhaps, she thought, the future could be different. As time passed, Amina's trust in Rafik deepened. She began confiding more of her struggles, including the manipulations and pressures from the three men in her life. Rafik offered guidance, helping her understand that she had the right to protect herself and assert boundaries. He encouraged her to take small but meaningful steps toward reclaiming her independence. For Amina, this support was transformative. She began to realize that she was not powerless, that she could begin to change her circumstances with careful thought and courage. Through these encounters, fate had introduced someone into Amina's life who offered not just friendship, but hope. Rafik's presence became a turning point, a beacon of light in a world that had been dominated by fear and control. For the first time, Amina began to imagine a life where she could feel safe, respected, and valued. The darkness that had filled her days did not disappear entirely, but it was no longer the only force shaping her existence. Amina's meetings with Rafik became a sanctuary. Each conversation, each shared moment, strengthened her spirit. She began to understand that true support did not come from manipulation or fear, but from patience, understanding, and care. And as she allowed herself to trust again, she felt a quiet but growing belief that her life could change, that she could find freedom, and that she might one day experience happiness without fear. It was in these quiet, seemingly ordinary moments, walking through the park, talking on a sunlit bench, sharing memories and hopes, that Amina began to sense that her life could take a new direction. Fate had placed Rafik in her path, offering her the chance to rediscover trust, courage, and the possibility of happiness. And though she did not yet know the full path ahead, she felt a small but undeniable spark. The knowledge that change, and perhaps even love, could enter her life in ways she had never imagined. After meeting Rafik, Amina's life slowly began to change. The fear and anxiety that had dominated her every day did not disappear immediately, but for the first time, she felt a sense of possibility. She realized that she was not as powerless as she had believed. With Rafik's gentle encouragement, she began to take small steps toward regaining control over her life. Each day became an opportunity to reclaim her independence, even if the path was uncertain and difficult. The first step was learning to trust her own instincts again. For years, she had allowed the three men in her life to dictate her thoughts, actions, and decisions. She doubted herself constantly, second-guessing her every move. Rafik helped her understand that her feelings were valid, that she had a right to say no, and that her boundaries mattered. Slowly, she started noticing when she felt uncomfortable or pressured, and she allowed herself to acknowledge those feelings instead of suppressing them. This small but important change gave her the courage to start making choices for herself again. Amina began by asserting herself in small ways. She declined invitations and requests that made her uncomfortable, something she had never done before. At first, it was terrifying. The men who had manipulated her for so long were used to her obedience. Even small acts of resistance felt risky. Yet, each time she stood her ground, she discovered a little more strength within herself. She realized that she could survive consequences and that her life did not have to be dictated by fear. Rafik remained a steady source of support during these early steps. He guided her without forcing her to act too quickly. He helped her understand the importance of patience, planning, and self-care. They spent hours discussing strategies to protect herself and regain independence. Rafik also helped her identify allies, people who genuinely cared for her well-being and could provide support if needed. Slowly, Amina began to understand that she was not truly alone and that asking for help was not a sign of weakness but of courage. As she grew stronger emotionally, Amina realized it was time to address the men who had caused her so much fear. This step was terrifying. She remembered the countless moments when they had controlled her with subtle threats and manipulation. The thought of confronting them filled her with anxiety, yet she knew it was necessary if she wanted to reclaim her life fully. With Rafik's encouragement and careful planning, she began to prepare herself mentally and emotionally for this challenge. The first confrontation was with her father's business partner. Amina approached the situation calmly, using clear and firm language to express her boundaries. She explained that she would no longer tolerate manipulation or threats, and that she expected respect in all future interactions. At first, he reacted with disbelief, attempting to pressure her into compliance. But Amina remained firm, relying on the confidence and inner strength she had been cultivating. Eventually, he realized that she would no longer be easily controlled, and he retreated, at least temporarily, from his attempts to dominate her life. The neighbor was the next challenge. Amina approached him with the knowledge that she had the right to protect herself. She refused to engage in conversations or favors that made her uncomfortable, setting clear boundaries. Initially, he tried to manipulate her with guilt and subtle threats, but she had learned to recognize these tactics. By staying calm and consistent, she slowly forced him to respect her decisions. Each successful confrontation reinforced her belief in her own strength and ability to protect herself. The family friend was perhaps the most difficult. His long-standing relationship with her family had given him a sense of authority that was hard to challenge. Amina, with Rafik's guidance, carefully explained that she would no longer be influenced by his manipulations. She spoke with calm determination, emphasizing that her life and choices were her own. At first, he reacted with anger, attempting to intimidate her, but her unwavering resolve made it clear that she would not back down. Over time, he ceased his attempts to control her, and Amina felt a profound sense of relief and liberation. Through these confrontations, Amina began to experience a transformation. The fear that had once ruled her life started to fade, replaced by a growing sense of confidence and self-respect. She realized that she was capable of standing up for herself, that her voice mattered, and that her well-being was worth protecting. The journey was not easy. There were moments of doubt and anxiety, but each small victory reinforced her belief in her own strength. As Amina reclaimed her independence, she also began to explore the dreams she had once put aside. She returned to her studies with renewed focus, determined to achieve the goals she had set for herself before fear had taken hold. Rafik encouraged her to pursue her passions, reminding her that education and personal growth were tools for empowerment. Slowly, Amina started to imagine a future where she could live freely, make her own choices, and experience happiness without fear. Amina also began to rebuild her social life. She reconnected with friends she had distanced herself from, finding comfort and support in relationships built on trust and mutual respect. These friendships provided additional strength, helping her navigate the challenges of her new life. She learned the value of surrounding herself with people who genuinely cared for her well-being, and she began to feel a sense of community that had been missing for years. Throughout this process, Rafik remained a constant presence. His support went beyond practical guidance. He also provided emotional stability. He celebrated her victories, no matter how small, and offered comfort during moments of doubt. His patience and understanding allowed Amina to grow at her own pace, fostering a sense of trust and safety that she had not experienced before. Over time, this trust blossomed into a deep connection, one that offered the promise of companionship and love built on respect and understanding. Amina's transformation was not only external but internal as well. She began to see herself differently, recognizing her own worth and the power she held over her life. The feelings of fear and helplessness that had once dominated her thoughts were gradually replaced by confidence and hope. She discovered that she had the strength to overcome obstacles, face challenges, and pursue happiness. This realization was empowering, giving her the courage to embrace the possibilities that life had to offer. One day, as she walked through the park where she had first met Rafik, Amina reflected on how far she had come. The fear that had once consumed her seemed distant, replaced by a sense of resilience and determination. She realized that the journey to reclaim her life had been difficult, but every step had been worth it. She had faced her fears, set boundaries, and begun to rebuild her life on her own terms. The sense of freedom she felt was exhilarating, and she knew that she would continue to grow and thrive. Amina also began to notice the subtle ways in which her strength inspired others. Friends and family members who had once seen her as timid now recognized her courage and determination. Her story of resilience became a quiet source of inspiration, demonstrating that even in the face of fear and manipulation, it was possible to reclaim one's life and find happiness. This realization filled Amina with a sense of pride and accomplishment, reinforcing her belief in her own abilities. As the days turned into weeks, Amina continued to build a life defined by independence, confidence, and hope. She pursued her education, nurtured meaningful relationships, and explored opportunities for personal growth. Rafik remained by her side, offering support, encouragement, and companionship. Together, they navigated the challenges of life, finding joy in simple moments and strength in their shared journey. Through this process, Amina learned valuable lessons about resilience, trust, and the importance of setting boundaries. She realized that true strength was not just about facing external challenges, but also about recognizing one's own worth and advocating for oneself. The journey had been difficult, but it had also been transformative, allowing her to discover the depth of her courage and the possibilities of a life lived with intention and hope. By the end of this period, Amina had emerged as a stronger, more confident individual. She had faced her fears, reclaimed her independence, and begun to embrace a future filled with hope and possibility. The journey was ongoing and challenges would still arise, but she now possessed the tools, support, and inner strength to navigate them successfully. With Rafik's guidance and her own determination, she had taken control of her life and begun to shape a future defined not by fear, but by choice, resilience, and the promise of happiness. After months of careful rebuilding, Amina's life had transformed in ways she had never imagined possible. The fear and pressure that had once ruled her days were gradually replaced with a sense of freedom and hope. She had confronted the men who had manipulated her, reclaimed her independence, and learned to trust herself again. Each small victory had strengthened her courage, and each act of self-assertion had reinforced her belief in her own strength. But beyond independence, Amina now faced the possibility of something she had almost forgotten: true love and companionship. Her relationship with Rafik had grown steadily, quietly, and naturally. What had begun as simple conversations in the park had evolved into a deep connection built on trust, understanding, and shared experiences. Rafik had never rushed her, never pressured her, and never tried to control her. Instead, he had offered steady support, encouragement, and gentle guidance, allowing her to heal at her own pace. Amina found herself looking forward to their time together, feeling a sense of comfort and safety that she had never experienced with anyone else. Over time, Amina realized that her feelings for Rafik were more than gratitude or friendship. She admired his patience, his kindness, and his unwavering respect for her boundaries. She felt a warmth in his presence, a calm reassurance that life could be better than the fear-filled existence she had endured for so long. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life not just free from fear, but filled with happiness, love, and shared dreams. One evening, as they walked through the park during sunset, Amina shared a story from her childhood, a dream she had once held but had set aside because of fear. Rafik listened attentively, encouraging her to speak freely and believe in herself. As the sky turned shades of orange and pink, he took her hand gently, and she felt an undeniable connection. In that moment, she understood that love was not just a feeling but a partnership, two people supporting, respecting, and growing with each other. The journey toward love had not been easy. Amina's past experiences had left scars that made trusting another person difficult. She had been manipulated, controlled, and pressured, and the thought of opening her heart again was terrifying. Yet, Rafik's consistent kindness and patience created a safe space where she could explore her feelings without fear. She learned that love could exist without control, without fear, and without manipulation. A love built on equality, trust, and understanding. As their bond deepened, Amina also began to embrace the possibilities of her own life. She returned to her studies with renewed focus, pursuing goals she had once thought impossible. Rafik encouraged her ambitions, celebrating each achievement and reminding her of her potential. Together, they planned small steps toward the future, discussing dreams, hopes, and plans in a way that felt safe and exciting. Amina began to feel a sense of empowerment she had never experienced before, a belief that she could shape her own life and future. Her relationships with family and friends also began to improve. Amina shared her experiences cautiously, helping loved ones understand the challenges she had faced. With their support and understanding, she felt less alone in her journey. Friends admired her courage, and family members were proud of the strength she had shown in reclaiming her life. These connections became another layer of support, reinforcing her sense of belonging and the importance of nurturing positive, respectful relationships. Despite the joy and progress in her life, Amina never forgot the dark times she had endured. The fear and manipulation she had faced left lessons that she carried with her. She understood the importance of self-respect, boundaries, and vigilance. She also learned to recognize the early signs of manipulation and control, ensuring that she could protect herself and make wise decisions. These lessons, though born from pain, became tools that helped her navigate life with greater confidence and clarity. Rafik's presence continued to be a source of strength. He encouraged Amina to take risks, try new experiences, and step outside the small, protective world she had built for herself. Together, they traveled to nearby towns, explored nature trails, and shared simple joys like cooking together or reading in the park. Each shared experience strengthened their bond, reinforcing the trust and love that had grown between them. For Amina, these moments were more than just enjoyable. They were proof that life could be full of happiness and connection, even after hardship. Amina also began to help others in subtle ways, inspired by her own journey of resilience. She became a quiet source of support for friends and acquaintances who faced challenges, offering advice, encouragement, and understanding. Her experiences had given her empathy and insight, allowing her to connect with others on a deep level. Through helping others, she found additional purpose and fulfillment, realizing that her journey of healing and strength could also inspire hope in those around her. One particularly memorable afternoon, Amina and Rafik sat by a small lake near the edge of town, watching the water ripple in the gentle breeze. They talked about the past, the challenges they had faced, and the dreams they hoped to achieve together. Amina reflected on the incredible journey she had undergone, the fear, the pressure, the moments of despair, and she realized how far she had come. She had not only survived but had transformed her life, finding courage, independence, and the possibility of love. In that moment, Amina understood the true power of fate and timing. If she had not encountered Rafik when she did, she might still be trapped in fear, doubt, and manipulation. But fate had led him into her life at precisely the right time, offering her support, trust, and love when she was ready to accept it. This realization filled her with gratitude, not just for Rafik, but for her own courage and resilience. She had taken the difficult steps to reclaim her life, and fate had rewarded her with a partnership built on respect and mutual care. As their relationship deepened, Amina and Rafik began discussing long-term plans. They dreamed of building a life together, one filled with love, support, and shared experiences. Amina felt confident that she could now navigate challenges with Rafik by her side, relying on her own strength as well as their partnership. The future, once uncertain and frightening, now seemed full of possibilities. Amina's personal growth was evident in every aspect of her life. She carried herself with confidence, spoke with clarity, and made decisions based on her own values and desires. The woman who had once been trapped by fear and manipulation had blossomed into someone capable of shaping her own destiny. Her resilience, courage, and determination were now the foundation of a life filled with hope, joy, and love. One evening, as the sun set over the small town, casting golden light across the rooftops, Amina and Rafik walked hand in hand through the quiet streets. Amina reflected on her journey, from fear to freedom, from despair to hope, and from isolation to love. Every challenge she had faced, every moment of courage, had led her to this point. She realized that life, even in its darkest moments, could hold incredible surprises, and that love and happiness were possible even after suffering. In the months and years that followed, Amina and Rafik continued to grow together. They faced challenges, of course, as all couples do, but their relationship was rooted in trust, respect, and shared values. Amina's past no longer defined her. Instead, it had shaped her into a stronger, wiser, and more compassionate person. She had learned to value herself, to protect her boundaries, and to embrace the possibilities of life with courage and hope. Amina's story became an inspiration, not because it was free of challenges, but because she had faced them with courage and determination. She had taken control of her life, reclaimed her independence, and opened her heart to love. Through patience, resilience, and the support of someone who truly cared, she had transformed her life in ways she had once thought impossible. Ultimately, Amina's journey demonstrated the power of human strength, trust, and compassion. Life had pushed her to the edge, but she had not fallen. Fate had introduced Rafik into her life at the right moment, offering her not just love, but partnership, understanding, and hope. And in embracing both her own strength and the support of another, Amina found a life filled with freedom, happiness, and the promise of a bright future.